Flashback. 2 years ago, the room was dark, a single faint ray of moonlight peeking through the heavy curtains. Won sat on the cold floor, her back resting against the bedside. Her knees were pulled to her chest, her arms wrapped tightly around them as though trying to shield herself from the storm raging inside her. Tears streamed silently down her face, her teeth clenched so hard it felt like they'd crack. Her fists, balled and trembling, pressed against her thighs. Her mind was a battlefield, filled with flashes of every memory she had tried to bury. Every injustice, every stolen moment of happiness, every word spoken to diminish her, all of it came crashing down like waves in a storm. 12-year-old Won mom, little Won stammered, holding tightly to a small teddy bear with faded pink fur. "This is my favorite. Please, don't take it." Mrs. Lee stood towering above her with an irritated look, her hands on her hips. Jiha, standing behind her, had tear-filled eyes as she pointed at the bear. Mrs. Lee's voice was sharp. "Won, give it to Jiha. She's your elder sister. Stop being selfish." But Mom, it's mine. She always takes my things." "Why can't you tell her no for once?" Won cried out, her tiny hands clutching the bear even tighter. Mrs. Lee leaned down, snatching the bear from Won's grasp with a force that made her stumble back. "You're not a baby anymore, Won. Stop whining. Grow up." Jiha, hiding her smirk, took the bear and clutched it as though it had always been hers. Little Won's tears fell harder as she ran to her room, her cries unheard. 14-year-old Won burst into the living room, holding her school report card with a bright smile. "Mom, Dad, guess what? I came first in class." Her father glanced up from his newspaper with a small smile, but before he could say anything, a loud sniffle caught their attention. Jiha was sitting on the couch, her eyes red as Soha gently patted her back. Mrs. Lee frowned at Won. "Won, enough. Can't you see how upset Jiha is?" Won's smile faltered, her joy crumbling. "But Mom, it's not my fault if she got a C," she muttered, looking at Jiha. Jiha sobbed louder, burying her face into Soha's shoulder. I tried so hard." Won miserly barked. "Behave yourself." "How dare you say something like that? Apologize to your sister this instant." Won felt anger rise in her chest. "Why should I? She's always wasting her time chatting with boys. I'm surprised she even got AC." A sharp slap landed on Won's cheek, silencing her completely. She looked up at her mother with wide, tearful eyes. "Won, how dare you talk to your sister like that?" Mrs. Lee yelled. Soha clicked her tongue. "Such a brat you've raised, Yoon." Mrs. Lee looked apologetically at Soha. "Annie, I'm so sorry." "She won't behave like this again." Won stormed off to her room, slamming the door behind her. "This is my dress," Won shouted, clutching the lavender gown to her chest. "I saved up for this, and it took so much effort to find it." Mrs. Lee's face hardened. "Won, stop being so difficult. Jiha is older than you, and she needs it more. She's upset, can't you see? Why does she always want my things?" Won's voice cracked as her frustration boiled over. Why can't she get her own? Mrs. Lee snatched the dress from Won's hands, her grip firm. "You are grounded for a week," she yelled before handing the dress to Jiha, who accepted it with a fake pout. Jiha walked away, her lips twitching into a triumphant smile as Won stood frozen, tears brimming in her eyes. Won ran to her room, collapsing on the bed as her sobs echoed in the silent house. Present, Won sitting on the floor, her breathing was ragged as the memories replayed in her mind like a cruel movie. Why was it always me?" Won whispered, her voice trembling. Her hands clutched her head as the voices began to echo around her, growing louder and louder. "Won, give it to Jiha. Won, behave yourself." "Won, Jiha needs it more than you. Won, you can get something else." Read more, her hands pressed against her ears, trying to drown out the noise. "Stop, stop," she screamed, tears streaming down her cheeks. Her breaths were shallow, her chest heaving as she stared into the darkness. Slowly, her sobs quieted, replaced by a new emotion, anger. Her fists clenched as her jaw tightened. "They took everything," she whispered, her voice shaking with fury. "They took my toys, my achievements, my dresses. But I won't let them take him." Her lips curled into a bitter smile, her eyes glinting with determination. "Taehyung is mine. I saw him first. I fell for him first. And I'll be damned if I let them snatch him away too." Her voice grew louder, filled with venom. "I will take him back. No. I will snatch him back, just like they always snatched my things. He was mine to begin with. They had no right." She threw her head back and laughed, a sound filled with pain, anger, and madness. Her laughter echoed in the empty room, the walls reverberating with her resolve. She wiped her tears, her lips curling into an evil smirk. "Let the game begin." Flashback, Jihoon's words. 2 years ago, it was a warm afternoon. Won was sitting on a park bench, her hands fidgeting with a small notebook as her best friend Jihoon sat beside her, munching on a bag of chips. "You know," Jihoon began, his tone light and teasing. Taehyung looked so confused at his wedding. It was kind of hilarious. Won frowned, her eyes narrowing. "What do you mean confused?" Jihoon chuckled, taking another chip. "I mean, he thought he was marrying you." Won froze, her notebook slipping from her grasp and landing on the ground. "What did you just say?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jihoon laughed again, oblivious to the storm he was unleashing. "Hyung thought you were going to be the bride." Imagine his face when Jiha walked down the aisle instead. I swear, he looked like he'd seen a ghost. Her heart sank, a chill spreading through her body. "He thought it was me," she whispered, her voice trembling. Jihoon nodded, still unaware of the gravity of his words. "Yeah, apparently, your mom must have told him it was you." Classic mix-up, right? But hey, Jiha ended up being the bride, so no harm done, right? Won's mind spiraled, Jihoon's voice fading into the background. It wasn't a mix-up, it was a lie. Her mother had lied again. Taehyung never chose Jiha. He was tricked, just like Won had been her entire life. Present Won in the kitchen, the memory hit her like a tidal wave. Won stood in the kitchen, a knife in her hand as she chopped vegetables on the cutting board. Her movements were mechanical, her mind racing as Jihoon's words replayed in her head. "He thought he was marrying you." Imagine his face when Jiha walked down the aisle. She paused, her hand gripping the knife tightly. Her lips curled into a sinister smirk as she began to hum a haunting tune, the rhythm eerily calm yet filled with malice. "I'm coming, Jiha darling," she muttered under her breath, her tone dripping with venom. She picked up a piece of the chopped vegetable, twirling it between her fingers before dropping it back on the board. "I'm coming to take back what's mine," she whispered, her voice low and dangerous. "You lied, you stole, but you can't keep him. He was mine to begin with. I need him back." Her laughter echoed softly through the room, chilling and devoid of warmth. She slammed the knife down on the cutting board with a loud thud, her smirk widening as she stared at the sliced vegetables. "Let's see how long you can hold on to him, Jiha," she said, her eyes glinting with determination. "Because I'll make sure you lose him. Just like you made me lose everything." With that, she resumed her humming, her voice light yet haunting as the darkness of her plans began to unfold in her mind. Here's the detailed scene, written with intensity and suspense as requested. Won sat silently on the plane to Seoul, her eyes fixated on the dark horizon outside. She had told no one about her departure, leaving behind a note to ensure her absence went unnoticed. Her heart raced, not with fear, but with a burning determination. She wasn't returning to mend bridges or heal wounds. She was coming back to reclaim what was rightfully hers. Days turned into weeks as she secretly followed Jiha, watching her parade around as Mrs. KIMTAEHYUNG, the wife of a billionaire, her Taehyung. Won's Taehyung. Jiha's life seemed perfect on the surface, filled with luxuries, public appearances, and an air of arrogance that burned Hwaeun's soul. One evening, unable to contain her anger, Hwaeun headed to a high-end club. She thought the loud music and flashing lights would drown out the storm in her mind, but fate had other plans. In the dimly lit club, Hwaeun's sharp eyes caught sight of Taehyung. Sitting alone in the VIP area, he looked distraught, his face hard, his jaw clenched. His fingers toyed with a glass of whiskey as he leaned back in the leather seat. "He's upset," Hwaeun murmured to herself, her eyes softening. Or angry, maybe. Her heart ached at the sight of him, but her resolve remained firm. If Jiha had stolen him, Hwaeun would take him back by any means necessary. She spotted a waiter carrying a tray of drinks toward Taehyung's table. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed a vial from her purse and walked toward the waiter. Pretending to stumble, she bumped into him. "Oh, I'm so sorry," Hwaeun exclaimed, steadying the tray. The waiter waved it off and continued, not noticing Hwaeun's quick switch. She swapped Taehyung's drink with one she had tampered with. Minutes later, Taehyung took a sip from the glass, his expression unchanging at first. But soon, his eyes grew heavy, and he rubbed his temples. Standing up, he stumbled slightly and made his way to a private VIP room. Hwaeun followed him, her breath hitching as she entered the dark room. "Who are you?" Taehyung's voice was low and rough, his words slurred. "Get out!" He leaned against the wall, unable to stand properly. His vision blurred as he tried to focus on her. "It's me, Taehyung," Hwaeun whispered, stepping closer. "Hwaeun," he frowned, his body stiffening. But as his eyes adjusted, he recognized her face. A small, tired smile crept onto his lips. "Hwaeun, where did you go, He stumbled forward and pulled her into a tight hug. Hwaeun's arms circled him, her emotions overwhelming her. "How could you marry her?" She whispered, her voice trembling. "I didn't want to." He murmured, his head dropping onto her shoulder. "I didn't have a choice." Taehyung grew dizzier, his legs faltering. Hwaeun guided him to the bed, helping him lie down. She sat beside him, her fingers brushing through his hair as he mumbled incoherent words. "You don't let her hug you, right?" Hwaeun asked softly. "Never," Taehyung replied, his voice faint. "Only my Hwaeun can." Her heart fluttered at his words. She leaned down and pressed her lips to his. Taehyung kissed her back instinctively, the kiss growing deeper, more passionate. The night blurred into an intense, emotional moment between them, but as the sun rose, Hwaeun woke first. She adjusted Taehyung's clothing, cleaned the bed, and left quietly, ensuring he wouldn't remember anything. Later that day, Hwaeun entered the Kim mansion disguised as a maid. She made her way to Jiha's room, where her rival was still sleeping. Hwaeun silently tied Jiha's hands and feet, gagging her mouth before the latter woke up in panic. Jiha's eyes widened, her muffled screams echoing in the room. Hwaeun crouched down, her face inches from Jiha's. "I hate you," she hissed. "I've hated you my entire life. You've always snatched what's mine, my toys, my dresses, my achievements. And now, my Taehyung." Jiha shook her head, tears streaming down her face as she struggled against the restraints. "But not this time," Hwaeun continued, her voice trembling with anger. "You won't take him from me. He was mine first. I saw him first. I loved him first." Without hesitation, Hwaeun ended Jiha's life, her emotions boiling over into one decisive act. She untied Jiha, covered her with a blanket, and began to leave. In her haste, she accidentally dropped the blooded knife on the floor but didn't notice. Taehyung returned home later that morning, still groggy from the night before. He glanced at the clock. 11 a.m. Jiha usually slept until the afternoon, so he didn't disturb her. After freshening up, he walked back into the room, noticing something odd. A knife lay on the floor, its blade smeared with red. Taehyung frowned, picking it up. The sight of blood made his stomach churn. He turned toward the bed and approached Jiha, gently shaking her shoulder. Jiha, wake up, he said softly. She didn't respond. Jiha, his voice grew louder, panic creeping in. He pulled the blanket away, only to stumble back in shock. Jiha's lifeless body lay before him, blood staining the sheets. At that moment, the door opened and a maid walked in. Her scream pierced the air as she saw the gruesome scene. Within minutes, the entire household was in chaos, and the police were called. Taehyung was arrested, his fingerprints found on the knife. The timeline didn't match. Jiha had died around 8 to 9 a.m., while Taehyung left the club at 11 a.m., but no one cared. The evidence was stacked against him. Unbeknownst to everyone, Hwajin had carefully hidden her identity, her gloves ensuring no traces were left behind. The Kim mansion had been eerily silent since Jiha's death. Taehyung, now under house arrest, spent most of his time trying to piece together what had happened. His mind was clouded, the events of that night hazy and incomplete. The Lee family, however, was convinced of his guilt, pointing to his lack of affection toward Jiha and his cold demeanor as proof. It had been weeks since the police began their investigation, and tension grew thicker with each passing day. One afternoon, a senior officer arrived at the mansion, holding a folder that seemed heavier than the air in the room. Taehyung sat in his study, his hands clasped tightly as the officer entered. "Taehyung, did you find something?" The officer nodded, his expression serious, as he placed the folder on the desk. "Officer, yes, Mr. Kim, we've uncovered some crucial evidence." He opened the folder, revealing images and documents. "Officer, we retrieved security footage from the club you visited that night. In the video, you can be seen entering the VIP areas. Shortly after, a woman followed you. She stayed until early morning, leaving the club around 6 a.m. The officer slid a still from the footage toward Taehyung. It showed a blurry image of a woman entering the club, her face partially hidden. "Taehyung, who was she?" The officer pulled out a sketch. "Officer, we questioned the waiter who bumped into this woman that night. With the help of a sketch artist, we identified her." He placed the sketch on the table. Taehyung's eyes widened as he recognized the face. "Taehyung, Hwajin," his voice was barely above a whisper. The officer nodded. "Officer, this is Lee Hwajin, Jiha's cousin sister Taehyung." "That's not possible. She's abroad either in the US or the UK." The officer pulled out more documents. "Officer, we verified the airline records. Tickets were booked under her name, and she arrived in Seoul a few weeks before the crime." When I questioned the Lee family about her absence from Jiha's funeral, they confirmed she hadn't returned for months due to her strained relationship with Jiha. Taehyung's mind spun as he tried to process the information. "Taehyung, Hwajin did all this, but why?" The officer hesitated before speaking again. "Officer, during our investigation, Soha mentioned something. She said Hwajin was in love with you, Mr. Kim, but Jiha also loved you. Apparently, Hwajin was forced to give you up for Jiha's sake." Taehyung's heart pounded, memories of why, and shy smiles, her stolen glances, and the way she always seemed to light up around him flooded his mind. "Taehyung, but I was told she had a boyfriend." "Officer, we couldn't find any evidence of that, Mr. Kim. This is all we know. Based on this information, Hwajin is our prime suspect." "Do you remember anything about that night?" Taehyung clenched his fists, frustration etched on his face. "Taehyung, no, I've tried, but I can't remember anything." The officer sighed and stood up. "Officer, should we issue an arrest warrant for her?" Taehyung's mind raced. He thought about Hwajin, her pain, her sacrifices, and the possibility that she had been pushed to her limits. He couldn't let her be arrested, not yet. "Taehyung, wait." The officer smirked slightly, as if anticipating this reaction. "Officer, yes, sir." Taehyung opened a drawer, pulling out several bundles of cash. He placed them on the table, his gaze unwavering. "Taehyung, close the case." Destroy all the evidence? The officer's eyes widened for a moment before he composed himself. Officer, sir. Taehyung, I'll pay you double once the case is closed and everything is destroyed. The officer nodded, picking up the money. Officer, understood. It might take a week, but I'll ensure it's done. He saluted Taehyung before leaving the room. After the officer leaves, Taehyung leaned back in his chair, his head resting against the cushion. His mind was a whirlwind of emotions, confusion, anger, and disbelief. Taehyung to himself, Wyan, I thought you were a kitten, but you're a wildcat. What did they do to you to push you this far? He rubbed his temples, the memory of that night just out of reach. Taehyung, why can't I remember anything? What happened between us? Wyan? The weight of the situation pressed down on him as he tried to piece together the truth. A few months had passed since the case had gone cold. The public, the Lee family, and even Jiha's friends had slowly moved on, leaving Taehyung to navigate the storm in silence. But behind his calm exterior, Taehyung was unraveling the truth, piece by piece. One late night, Taehyung sat in his study, staring out the window as the city lights flickered. The events of that fateful night finally came rushing back to him. It hit him like a tidal wave, the moments in the VIP room, Wyan's teary eyes, her soft voice whispering, "Why did you marry her?" And the way she held onto him as if her life depended on it. He remembered her words, her kiss, and the desperation in her touch. Taehyung clenched his fists. Taehyung to himself, she came back for me, all of this. It was because of me, fueled by his newfound clarity. Taehyung dug deeper. Using his wealth and influence, he quietly paid off several maids and staff members from the Lee household to gather intel. What he uncovered left him seething with rage. The maids revealed how Wyan had been treated as an outsider in her own family. The favoritism toward Jiha, the constant berating, and the sacrifices forced upon Wyan painted a heartbreaking picture. Maid 1, Mr. Kim, Wyan was always blamed for everything. Even when she succeeded, they made her feel like she wasn't enough. Maid 2, Jiha took everything from her toys, her achievements, even you. They made Wyan give up on you without a second thought, Taehyung coldly, and no one stood up for her. The maids exchanged nervous glances before shaking their heads. Maid 1, she was alone, sir, completely alone. Taehyung sat in his office, staring at the Lee family's financial and business records. He smirked, his mind working meticulously. Taehyung to himself, they destroyed her life, but now it's my turn to destroy theirs. Over the following weeks, Taehyung orchestrated a silent campaign against the Lee family. Using his connections, he ensured their businesses faced subtle yet devastating setbacks, deals falling through, suppliers pulling out, and investors losing confidence. As their financial empire began to crumble, Taehyung bided his time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Taehyung, however, was not ready to stop there. He ensured that Wyan's name remained completely detached from Jiha's case. He spent an exorbitant amount of money to erase any lingering evidence and paid the inspector even more to spread false leads about the case. As the Lee family's situation stabilized under Taehyung's help, the public's attention shifted away from Jiha's murder entirely. Taehyung spent the next few weeks quietly watching Wyan from afar, ensuring she was safe and unaware of his plans. Taehyung to himself, I won't let anyone touch you, Wyan, not the Lees, not the police. You've suffered enough. It's my turn to protect you. What happened later you all know from first part. The end greater than.